Hi everyone, the team of Raven Wild is here and we just wanted to have a little Q&A to let you know some little details and behind the scenes facts about how we made the book. So we're just going to start by introducing ourselves. So I'm Adam and I'm one of the writers of the book.
I'm Bo Moore and I was the background illustrator.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Spice and I was one of the writers.
Hi, I'm Chaz Harris and I'm one of the writers.
And I'm Christine Lowton, and I was the character illustrator and designer.
Raven Wild is our third book as a team, with Caitlin joining us for this book. How did you become involved with the project?
I've sort of known Chaz for quite a long time, so we sort of briefly discussed it before after talking about the first book. And I guess I was just sort of waiting in the wings for something like this to happen, really.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the co-writing process now between Chaz, Caitlin and I, and how that worked? And
So basically everyone came around to my place and we just sat down and started brainstorming. There was a lot of different ideas that we threw out. These guys were much more experienced with the cutting down of the stories. For me, I'm mostly a short story writer, so that came reasonably naturally. I think we collaborated really well, actually. We've got similar reading histories with fantasy books and stuff like that, and Adam and I get on really well. It was a very smooth, synergistic kind of experience. The other good thing was that Chaz and I tend to fly off into creative land, and Adam would bring us back down to earth a few times to be like, yeah, you're probably going a bit far there. So he was a good moderating influence.
The fun of it is, you're condensing things down, but there are things that you're kind of going, oh, we can't really fit that into a children's storybook, but that might be something we get to expand upon later. We had the same thing with Maiden Voyage with Jamie and all these great ideas, but you're like, oh, that doesn't necessarily work in the children's book format, but we can definitely see another place for that working if we got to expand upon it and build. Yeah.
Christine and Bo, do you want to talk to us a little bit about your process of how you illustrate the books?
So this time round, Bo started out doing the just really quick sketch layouts for the page, simply because I was working full-time this time round, so it was a little bit trickier to juggle everything. And then once you kind of suss the layouts with the writers, they did reference photo shoot, got some good actors on board to pretend to be the characters, just to give us a good indication of what the shots might look like.
With that, Caitlin was standing in as Raven.
Yes, you were Raven, weren't you? That was really exciting. So yes, with Caitlin as Raven. And were you a character? I can't remember. I'm pretty sure I saw you at some point.
I feel like I might have been.
Yeah.
My husband, Ant Key, stood in for Finn a few times.
For Finn, yeah. So once we got those photo references, then I went in and started drawing out the characters as I sort of perceived them, and then Bo roughed out the backgrounds and did some colour studies for those, and then I go through and I do the line work, colour them up, and then put the characters on top of Bo's beautiful backgrounds, and then I came in and laid out the text and whatnot on top, and added the lighting with respect to the colour palettes that Bo's already chosen. Yeah, and then we kind of have final finished illustrations.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right?
Yeah. A lot of kind of what I end up doing is sort of figuring out what the kind of colour story of the entire work is, kind of as you move through different stages, just so everything feels quite cohesive. And of course, my other favourite part is each of the books will have a little animal on each page, and each animal is got different themes. So this book's theme is birds, of course.
Birds.
Yeah. So that's always a little fun thing I get to put in everywhere.
So keep an eye out for that when you're reading the book. Try and find the hidden bird on every single page.
What did we say before? It's the book that kind of keeps on giving visually. Every time you read it, you notice something more. So it's lovely. Do
you want to let us know a little bit about how long the illustration takes for both of you? I mean, it's probably slightly different for each of you.
It really depends on a lot of different factors. But for me, I'm looking at about maybe 2-3 days for a page, from the sketch to line, and then to colour, and then lighting and sort of painting on top of that. that can go a little faster or a little slower depending on kind of the detail level of the page. But because we have all the layouts for each page sorted out quite early, that really helps. So all it really is just enlarging that and adding layers of detail.
Yeah, I think exactly the same for me. It depends on multiple factors. So the more character-heavy pages, like the cameo page with all our wonderful backers that helped us out, that takes quite a long time. And then, because there's also an element of making the photos fit into our world. And yeah, I guess some of the pages have like just one character, like Misty, the big flying Misty page. So that was pretty quick.
What do you think the most challenging part of either the writing or the illustration was for each of you?
Obviously, because it's a trans book, probably the most difficult part was telling the trans narrative, but without it taking over the whole book. So we want it just to be like a fact of Raven's life that happened, and then it's done, and then the rest of the book's a huge adventure. But that was difficult both to like compact it into a small space and for it to be important but not so important that it overrode the whole book, and for it to still be a trans book without it being completely trans focused. So yeah, it was a really delicate balance, and that was difficult, and we went through a lot of different language changes. So it was a really big challenge. It was probably the most challenging thing for me in the book, was getting that right, perfectly balanced.
You'll see when you read it is that Raven transitions really early in the book, which I think is great because it's kind of like that happens and then she gets to move on. But then the rest of the story still connects to her transness in a really cool way, in that there's this gem, but it can only be wielded by a woman, and Raven wants to use this gem for the fact that she wants to validate her own womanhood. She's doing it for herself, and she doesn't. It's not to validate herself for anybody else, just for her.
I mean, everyone else in the book is absolutely confident that she will be able to wield the gem because you're totally a woman, but she's got her little niggling doubts because that's part of the trans experience.
Yeah.
I would say for me the biggest challenge would just be consistency between shots where characters are inside the temple, for instance. Characters have to be the same size in different angles, different in the same space, and it's that sort of thing that is just like 1,000 tiny little changes going back and forth between me and Christine to adjust things, and it's a very boring part of the process. But it's one where if you get it wrong, you only realize often once everything's been coloured and painted up nicely, and you're looking at it and you're going, oh, those stairs are much larger in this shot than this one, and very unexciting.
I'd probably say we were probably about halfway through illustrating the book, and I think at one point in sort of halfway through the book, Raven gives her hair tie to Finn, and then we were like, oh, then Raven's gonna have her hair down for the second part of the story. And then we were like, that's not very practical. At some point, she's got to defend the temple and is going to fight our villain Striker. So it was like, we need a hair tie again. And so we had to then improvise and think, well, we don't want an awkward moment where it's like, remember that hair tie I gave you as like a kind of token of my appreciation? It was like, yeah, no, can I have it back, please? So we improvised with sort of a vine that she uses to tie her hair back into, kind of braids and that. But just making sure that we'd kind of gone back and like every page, like we haven't got the old hair tie in this, have we? And yeah, that was probably like the biggest... the thing where you suddenly go, oh no, in the process. So that was a challenge in the visual side of it. And then I just think writing maybe was the how we were handling language and making sure we're using the right words and how to navigate that.
When to change the pronouns and
Yeah, definitely that.
Not too many words on the page.
Yep. All that, because you're having to keep in mind that you've got this amount of words on a page, and then you need enough space for the the imagery and all that.
Going back to what you were saying earlier, Chaz, about the hair tie and the vine, or the hair ribbon, I suppose it was. That was like me going through all the illustrations so far and being like, there's another one. I have to change this one as well. And I think it's all about getting that consistency and making the continuity of the shots. And
It wasn't so bad with Raven and her plait being on the right side, but I found it really difficult with Freya and her hair, because she had it sort of to one side, and getting it the right side every time for some reason just was a really big block for me. And then, I guess just in general, time juggling and finding time to do work on the illustrations whilst doing lots of other things as well. It's tricky being an adult sometimes.
In the new book, we've got a new animal sidekick, this time a bird named Misty. And Chaz, do you want to tell us a little bit about the history behind the name Misty?
Yeah, so when we were thinking about, each of our books has kind of an animal friend. So we had Milo in the first book and Bowie in the second. And then when we were thinking about the name for our kind of character in this book, which is a bird, we decided to call her Misty. And that was the significance of that name was naming Misty after the first two openly transgender women to win a primary in the US that happened at the same time. That's Misty Snow and Misty Plowright. And then there was also a reason why we chose the particular type of bird, which kind of came from Caitlin, so I'll let you expand on that.
We wanted to kind of have the trans pride flag colouring fairly front and centre in the book in some way. And we're looking through different birds because lots of different... We decided on a parrot, I'm pretty sure. We wanted an exotic bird. So we went through various iterations of what Misty might be, and we stumbled across the African grey, which has sort of very grey-blue plumage, and then its tail is quite pink-red, and those are obviously two of the colours in the trans pride flag. And they're also the most intelligent bird in the world. There's a couple of very famous African greys. One's called Alex, which could understand the concept of zero or none, which no other animal's been able to do before, and another one called Einstein, who has like a routine and does really cool noises and pretends to be spaceships and things.
Wow.
That's why we chose the African grey, was partly because of its intelligence, because it needs to be a talking bird, obviously. So
Yeah. I mean, the story of this book involves a gem which can cause animals to talk, so it made perfect sense.
absolutely.
Sweet. I just want to hear a little bit about, tell our viewers and readers a bit about what's the feedback that you kind of hear about the books in general the most.
We get a lot of emails and a lot of comments when we go to places like Armageddon, which is the New Zealand Comic Con event. But a lot of the feedback often is, I wish I'd had a book like this when I was growing up, and it's like across all three books pretty much. That's probably the most common thing I've heard.
What kind of difference do you think a book like this would have made for you if you had had it read to you as a young child?
Massive difference. There was no representation for trans kids when I was a kid, or trans people at all. At best, there was sort of like condescending tolerance of very major trans figures. At worst, it was just all really vile, disgusting stuff about trans people. So having a positive thing like this would have been like huge, massive.
Do you want to tell us a quick thought process that went through your mind when you first looked through the finished book?
I thought it was amazing. I thought it was beautiful. I cried quite a bit, especially with Raven's parents, because my parents were not accepting. So it was a nice sort of reliving of a bad moment of what could be for trans kids in the future.
Yeah, and that was really important when we were writing the book, I remember, was making sure that her parents were completely open. There were no questioning of her being trans. It was just like open arms acceptance.
Yeah, that's the whole Promised Land world, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I just want to ask what everyone's favourite page is. You can start if you like.
Alrighty. My favourite page would be the swamp page. It sort of goes into a little of the mythology of the setting, and I really enjoy that, like kind of the hint of the background world and in the past. And it really helps kind of like build up the like layers of the story for me.
So Caitlin, what was your favourite?
My favourite page was the one with Finn and Raven in the tree, where They're sitting surrounded by the orchids. Orchids are like my favourite flower, and yeah, I'm a hopeless romantic, so it was a very cool scene.
Beautiful. And Chaz?
I think my favourite page is later on in the book. It's kind of a little bit spoilery, but it's Stryker looming over the gem in his kind of dastardly kind of frown expression. It took us a few goes at it to get it from the kind of storyboard version to the final one, but then once we got the final version, I'm really happy with how it came out.
Sweet. And Christine?
So I've found my page, so I can show you.
Yes.
I don't know if I hold it up, if it's actually visible. So this one here, where Raven has grabbed Finn after he got caught, or was about to get caught, and is swinging him to safety. But mostly I love it just for the facial expressions for everyone. Raven's like, ha, gotcha. Finn's just absolutely terrified. And such angry henchmen as well.
What's next, I guess, is the next question. Chaz?
Well, I mean, at the moment, I think we haven't been able to kind of solve our kind of bottleneck is not having international distribution, or that we're hoping that maybe we could get the books acquired by the publishers in other regions and then get them distributed and kind of get them out there, because at the moment we self-publish, self-distribute out of New Zealand and ship the books off elsewhere in the world, which right now is even more expensive, I learned, because they've got surcharges for sending stuff. But I think at the moment, but until we kind of solve that roadblock, we kind of need, this will probably be the last one for the time being. But in saying that, we have written a screenplay based on the first book, so we're putting some effort into that and seeing what happens. And if that somehow may generate interest in the publishing side, that would be great. Yeah. But that's sort of where we're at with the release of this third book, and we're hoping, it'll be really great to see how people respond to this third story, and kind of, I guess it's a trilogy now. So
yep.
No, I guess we just really hope everyone who backed the book, and thank you so much for making it possible, and everyone who reads it, and please tell everyone you know about the books.
It's really helpful to give us reviews on Goodreads as well. That can be really helpful and doesn't cost anything to do.
Yeah. But yeah, we really hope you're as proud and happy of what we've created as we are.
Yeah.